I'm Josh Schneiderweiler, coming up on Football Today.
And then Gabriel Jesus! Oh, that's a peach! A beautiful, beautiful goal from Gabriel Jesus.
The London suburb of Crystal Palace was once home to John Logie Baird's revolutionary TV studios. And last night, another moment in broadcasting history was made there. Crystal Palace versus Bournemouth at Selhurst Park was the first Premier League game to be not televised on a traditional TV channel. It was broadcast, or rather streamed, on Amazon Prime.
In many ways, Amazon's stream of the Premier League last week sounded and looked similar to every traditional broadcast of the last decade. And yet, this marked a historic point in football consumption. As 2020 approaches, we look at Amazon's week of Premier League coverage and ask, what does it tell us about the future of football broadcasting? So this past week was the first time a tech company got into the broadcast ring here in the UK. So it's now Amazon, BT, and Sky. How much was on the line this last week, not just for Amazon, but for other tech companies looking to get into this space?
I think this week was an important proof of concept for streaming.
Steve McCaskill is a freelance writer covering technology, telecoms, and sports.
Amazon hasn't actually paid a lot of money for the Premier League compared to other broadcasters. It's dipping its toes in the water. But many within broadcasting and technology believe that sports streaming is the future. So it was important to see that it would work technically, that users would actually watch the games, they'd be used to the additional features. So it was important from a test point of view, but I don't think it was huge in terms of short-term impact.
You're a user, so how did you watch the first round of Amazon games?
I watched it in a number of places. Most of it was on my couch. I watched via a smart TV application, but I also watched a bit on my mobile when I was out and about yesterday before I got home. And then I also, as a broadcasting nerd, I actually tried out a few other applications and things like casting the stream from my phone to the TV using Google Chromecast.
What about, do you have any family members? Did they watch it, or did you talk with them about their experiences?
I spoke with my dad, who is a professional armchair fan now. He's retired. He's been a Sky subscriber since the service started. In fact, he got satellite TV because Eurosport said they were going to show every game of Italia 90. So he seems quite well placed to comment, and he thought it was great. He had a couple of issues with his Apple TV, but once he was watching on a smart TV, he was very happy with the service, despite the fact he usually watches games on satellite.
Just myself personally, I had a more similar experience to you. I was trying to Chromecast it. I mean, I also have an HDMI cord, so I just threw that on because at times it was just buffering a little bit. So I think everyone was just trying out their own little way, and I really enjoyed the experience after the first day where there was some issues, at least on my end. What were some of the differences between Amazon and BT and Sky?
It goes without saying, I think being able to watch all of the matches was the key differentiator. Although it's important to note that the BT Sport will do the same for New Year's Day. This is the first time people are able to pick the match they want. They've not been subject to the decisions by broadcasters. But there are a few other things I think would have been new to people. Although Sky and BT also offer applications with enhanced players, so you get real-time stats and video highlights. They also have linear channels, so being forced to use Amazon's application means it's the first time that people would have seen some of these features. So if you went to a game, you chose the game on the main menu, and you could get playlists of team news, previews, highlights, even individual goals if you wanted. And despite Amazon assembling a great team of commentators, you could even turn off that audio feed, so you could watch the game just with the stadium noise, so it's like you're at the stadium. Arguably the biggest innovation may have been the goal show.
Good evening. We've got 6 live Premier League matches for you to enjoy this evening. Every game, every goal is available to you to watch.
Which showed action from around the games, goals as they went in, with a studio panel, a bit like Soccer Saturday if they could show the action. And BT Sport do something like that for the Champions League because their TV rights deal allows that. And it's comparable to the US where the NFL has Red Zone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to NFL Red Zone presented by Amazon Prime. Scott Hansen here on week number 4. 7 hours of commercial-free football start now.
This has never been done before for the Premier League, so I think that was perhaps the biggest innovation.
And what were some of the responses to these changes and innovations?
I mean, I think for people, for the first time, being able to do this, that was quite a novelty, being able to customize your viewing experience. And in the broadcast industry, there's a lot of talk about personalization in the future. And I think this could be seen as the first step in the UK towards that.
But not everyone enjoyed their experiences. I know, as I mentioned, the first day on Tuesday, I had some buffering issues when I was watching my game, and I normally get, pretty good Wi-Fi. I live here in London. What other issues were people having from around the country and maybe voicing on social media?
I mean, inevitably, there were complaints about people having to get another subscription or finding a way to watch it because it wasn't on TV. You couldn't just go on your TV guide and look for it, but that was to be expected, and it's not something that can easily be changed. I saw quite a few people complaining about buffering, and that's not surprising when people have different connections, they have different devices. If you're watching on, Sky or BT, on Sky or Virgin Media, you're watching on standardized hardware through satellite or cable, which is more easily controlled. With streaming, there's a lot more variables. I must admit, I have a pretty decent broadband connection, and I actually encountered some issues when I was casting from my mobile to my TV, but I had no issues with the smart TV app. I was able to watch a 4K feed on that, but there were lots of complaints on social media. The other issue was latency. So the feed was often behind what was actually happening in the stadium. And that's true of any broadcast, but with streaming, it can be a bit longer because the amount of time it takes to capture the video, send it across the network, send it back, etc. And some people, perhaps who were following the game on social media or had friends at the stadium, were complaining of spoilers because their feed was behind the action.
Yeah, totally. No, my mother-in-law was following the game online. She didn't have Amazon, and she messaged me during the final Liverpool goal. And of course, I was a little perturbed at that. But these things I would imagine will get fixed a little bit. But, there's an interesting column that Jonathan Liew wrote in The Guardian, which kind of pointed out that he thought that they weren't really trying to be too different from BT and Sky in terms of their delivery. What did you think?
It was a very risk-averse production. I think in that regard, that was important for Amazon. It didn't want to be seen as messing it up, particularly when this is something so new. And there was some criticism of its US Open streaming coverage last year, while other streaming services have had some bad headlines as well. For example, in Australia, Optus had the World Cup rights and eventually had to relinquish those due to its technical issues. And another experiment in streaming in the UK was 11 Sports last season. They got the rights to the US PGA tournament, and the stream cut out before the crucial moment. So I think they just wanted to make everything as familiar as possible. It was a greatest hits of UK broadcasting talent with commentators, pundits, presenters drafted in from BBC and ITV. To paraphrase Gary Lineker, he said he thought he was the only person involved in British broadcasting not to be part of Amazon. It was very much as, a case of this is business as usual, this is new, but it's not rapidly different.
Let's track back to when Amazon signed the deal in 2018 for £90 million per season, running from 2019 to 2022. It feels like ages ago, but at the time, Richard Scudamore was still the CEO of the Premier League. So what do you think the conversation was like with him and the clubs he was talking to when they were forecasting this broadcast deal?
Well, Richard Scudamore was very successful in his role, and the reason he was successful was because of the revenue growth he delivered during his tenure. Each TV deal would go up in value, and the clubs benefited from that. But there is, and this was driven by competition between broadcasters, but there's a belief that traditional broadcast models are unsustainable and that viewers aren't necessarily willing to pay as the prices to watch live football as much as they used to, and that sports rights might be slightly overvalued. there were signs that this was plateauing, and this actually happened. The current TV deal is actually slightly lower than the previous one, and Richard Scudamore hoped that interest from the technology companies and streaming there'd be increased competition, money would go up, because the tech companies are trying to get more people involved in their ecosystem: Google, Netflix, Amazon, Facebook. And so Scudamore would perhaps have pitched the creation of 2 new TV packages as a way of getting these tech companies interested. There wasn't as much interest as would have been hoped. And there is a feeling that Amazon, if it isn't necessarily cut price, they've got a good deal on these rights. And I think the Premier League are okay with that because, again, they're positioning this as a proof of concept. If Amazon can make success of it, then other tech companies might think, we're interested, we'd like to get involved in this. And that competition will increase revenues. And the Premier League needs to adapt to changing market trends. There's signs of people are watching less TV. They're watching on their mobile, they're watching on social media. They're not as interested in taking out a 12-month pay TV subscription. This is especially true among younger viewers who perhaps are already priced out of going to games themselves because of high ticket prices. And there was a survey earlier this year that 52% of sport fans will cut the cord within the next 5 years, which means they will move away from traditional subscription services to things like Netflix and Amazon Prime. So, yeah, it would have been positioned as a way to move with the times and hopefully increase revenue.
As they're making this new broadcast deal, what does Amazon and their executive see in it for them and Amazon?
More Prime signups. The more people that Amazon can get, to be Prime subscribers, the better. The evidence is that people who subscribe to Amazon Prime spend more with Amazon, and that improves Amazon's retail business. And the 2 packages of games that Amazon have won are both in December. So that's quite important because people do a lot of shopping in December for Christmas. If they're on Prime, they're going to do a lot more shopping with Amazon. And people might think, that'd be quite, the Premier League might be quite nice to have in December. We can watch the games together on Boxing Day. So if Amazon sees that there's an increase in Prime subscriptions, an increase in sales, or perhaps there's more traction with people who join in December for the football but stay all year round and spend more money throughout the year, they'll be happy. And early indications suggest that it may be having an impact because Tuesday and Wednesday were the 2 biggest days in terms of Prime signups in the UK ever.
Do you think they were pleased with how it all went?
I think so. Firstly, it was a talking point. Everyone in football was talking about this. Even Gary Lineker on Match of the Day made some Amazon-related puns to start off the broadcast.
Good evening. I can safely say this is the best midweek match of the day of the season so far. It's Amazon. 8 games under the lights. Jermaine Genius and Danny Murphy are primed.
Everyone was talking about it. And, as I said before, the 2 biggest days in terms of Prime signups ever in the UK. The criticisms weren't unexpected, but I actually think it went well. There wasn't a huge outcry. There wasn't a major technical glitch. And I think people, perhaps even skeptics, liked being able to watch their team, being able to watch multiple matches, the added functionality.
So what are the tech companies or digital enterprises that are looking at Amazon's performance with a close eye this week?
The big tech companies will. I think Google, Apple and Facebook will be looking at this to see what the reaction has been. Because the UK is an extremely developed pay TV market. It might be more difficult to disrupt just because you've got those big players like Sky and BT that have got secured all the rights. So I think they'll be looking at what people's attitudes have been, viewing figures, again, because they're trying to get people into their ecosystem. Google's got a search business. It wants people to be in there. Apple, again, has got a growing services interest with things like Apple TV Plus, and Facebook wants more people on their platform. So I think they'll be keeping an eye on it.
So let's take a peek into the future of broadcast in football. When the new deal starts in 2022, what are some of the potential avenues or ways that it could change just in the next couple of years?
Well, I don't think Sky and BT are going anywhere. Football is still important to both of their businesses, and BT Sport has just renewed its contract with UEFA for the Champions League, and that was a big development. That suggests that BT is around for the next few years at least. But it'll be interesting to see if Premier League make more midweek packages of games available, in which the winners of those packages will be able to show every game, perhaps to tempt Amazon to go for more, another tech company to go for those. It's clear that digital is a big issue for Premier League. If you look at its search for a new chief executive, they've been looking at broadcasting, they've been looking at digital, and the Premier League will hope that technology allows for a growth in domestic TV rights.
So the one thing we haven't mentioned is the direct-to-consumer approach and OTT. How does that all fit into this?
So direct-to-consumer basically bypasses the middleman, in this case, the broadcaster. So some sports do it to increase reach. So if you're a minority sport, you might think you have a chance of reaching a bigger audience by having your own platform or going through something like YouTube, for example. Well, others believe that direct-to-consumer can increase revenues because they don't have to share it with the broadcaster. They can offer something that's better to the consumer. And this is common in North America where, for example, something like NFL Game Pass, where you can pay to watch any game you want all season. It's a risky move because you're giving up what can be guaranteed revenue in favour of something else. So we've not seen a major example of that, in the UK, for example. But the suggestion is the Premier League could do it in the future. Some people have said that 100 million people paying £10 a month or so would be more profitable than its existing TV deals.
If you brought in something like a Netflix version of football, got 100 million subscribers around the world paying £9 a month, you'd have no churn because no one would resist that price point. You'd bring in 11 billion every year rather than 2.7 billion or 8.1 billion every 3 years. And you'd build a model that would have enormous revenue, sustainability, income models and capital growth.
Reach.
There were some reports that the Premier League was actually considering to do this in Singapore earlier this year, but in the end it decided not to. It extended its agreement with its local TV partner. But the reason why people think it could be the Premier League is because they've got this marketing clout, they've got this brand awareness. If anyone could make a success, it could be the Premier League. So it could be that the Premier League are looking at this Amazon success as well, seeing if how people react to it.
How likely is some sort of OTT approach by the Premier League in the next decade or so?
I certainly don't think it's likely in the short term. It may be that perhaps they try it out in a couple of markets. Last week, UEFA said as much, that if it wasn't happy with the terms of its TV deal in a particular country for the Champions League, then it might decide to launch its own service. So I think it's possible we might see it in one or two markets. I don't know if we'll have got there with the UK. I think there are still plenty of third parties willing to pay for the rights that might make it a more profitable route for the Premier League.
It's interesting. So the Champions League is actually more likely to do it than the Premier League.
Potentially, in that UEFA has gone on the record to say that this could be an avenue they could pursue. That could be to put pressure on their existing rights holders. If they're worried that UEFA can go it alone, then they might decide to pay more. But I think in the UK, I don't see either anytime soon. But based on public comments, UEFA could be more likely than Premier League.
Does the Premier League look at this a bit differently now than even 3 or 4 years ago because of all of these new streaming platforms and competition from other forms of entertainment like social media, esports, and things like that?
I think all sports are, in terms of, changing viewer habits, going on, people watching on mobile, watching on social media. Something like esports, you can watch most of it for free online. You can watch people on Twitch, you can watch things on YouTube, and that's so accessible. Whereas sport, you have to pay a subscription fee or you have to seek it out deliberately. And you've seen a lot of sports, not just in terms of what they're doing with their broadcast, but the way they're actually packaging the sport, making it shorter, trying to make it more exciting for viewers. The International Olympic Committee has launched its own online channel in a bid to capture this audience, looking at new sports. Things like skateboarding will be at Tokyo 2020. And it's also looking at esports to see how that fits in with the movement. And all sports compete with other forms of entertainment. They're competing with Netflix, they're competing with YouTube. So it's a crowded marketplace, and the Premier League needs to be relevant, it needs to adapt. And if it thinks that its viewers are on streaming platforms rather than TV and it makes economic sense, then it has to at least consider it.
What things can we expect in the next broadcasting deal?
But I think the next TV deal will see more games than the current one. I think perhaps more midweek rounds. You'll be able to watch any game you want, like you have done this week. Perhaps the final day when all games are on at the same time. That will also be sold as a package of 10 games. There's obviously two things. First is that there are concerns that this could have a knock-on effect on attendances. I mean, if your team is playing away, let's say you're a Southampton fan, your team is playing away in Newcastle on a Wednesday night in December, that's a long journey to make. And you might be thinking, I might just watch it on TV, for example. And others have perhaps suggested that the Premier League doesn't want to make every game available because restricting the flow of matches that can be shown keeps the price up. And that's an accusation I think that's been levelled by Virgin Media in the past. So I think next TV deal will see more games, but I don't think we'll see the end of the 3 p.m. blackout. I don't think we'll see every game available for broadcast.
On that back, fans have voiced their displeasure about more subscriptions. Is the price of watching the Premier League now just going to go up?
It's already quite a lot. To watch all of the football in the UK, you have to pay close to, I think it's around about £100 a month. And I think subscription fatigue is a thing, because it's not just football you're paying for. It's your Netflix. It's if you subscribe to Spotify. There's a lot of subscriptions, and I think people will suddenly decide to stop paying for some of them. And also, again, it comes back to things like esports, with it being free. There's only so many things you can watch. Netflix for less than £10 suddenly looks quite attractive to football for a lot of people. There is a concern that people are paying too much for football, and the current model is unsustainable. It could be that perhaps they think better to show every game for £15 a month or what have you.
Do we think that it could change the way that we watch football if on midweek games, all fans are getting to choose the different games and they're all watching on Goal Show? And could it change the experience for fans?
I think people will have liked the taste that they've got this week. They would have liked that freedom to watch what they want. And as we've seen, once you give people a taste of it, then it can be difficult to. It's like closing the stable door if the horse is bolted. People might start to demand this in the future. So at the moment, it's a novelty, but people might start to think, why can't we have this every week? Why am I watching this match when I could be watching my team? So, like I said, I don't think you're going to have every single game broadcast as part of the next TV deal, but I think we'll see it be more common, especially in midweek when it's more difficult to get to games.
You can read Steve McCaskill's media, technology, and sport coverage on Forbes and elsewhere. The show is produced by John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and this was Football Today. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend. See you next time.